manipulated by the Biden administration, and that will no longer be allowed to allow that and these extensions going forward the way that they are. The program was intended to be temporary, and this extension of over 600,000 Venezuelans as well is alarming when you look at what we've seen in different states, including Colorado, with gangs doing damage and harming the individuals and the people that live there.
And in terms of our border, like the physical border, I've been there many times, you've been there many times. Who should be in charge? Who should have operational control of our border? The United States government or the Mexican drug cartels?
Oh, Senator, the United States needs to control our borders and secure them.
So if this were a job interview in the private sector, and you had somebody like Alejandro Mayorkas in charge, and we had the opportunity to upgrade to you, this would be the greatest upgrade in history of the United States of America. But I'm going to end my time with a startling statistic and actually a challenge to the Democrat Party. When Mayorkas was confirmed, every single Democrat voted to confirm him, and 6 Republicans joined all 50 Democrats in that confirmation. If we get to the vote, and hopefully, Chairman, we could do that Monday, because we cannot wait one single day without you being in charge of that department. We should have 100%, 100 senators vote for your confirmation. This will be the litmus test, in my mind, as to whether we have a Democrat Party that's actually serious about doing bipartisan things like securing this country and protecting our citizens. Any Democrat that voted for Mayorkas that does not vote for you should be in front of their voters and removed from office. Thank you for serving, Brian. Thank you for being here, for putting up with the nonsense that you guys have had to put up with over the years. You are going to make an amazing Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Slotkin.
Thanks for being here, and thanks for our time in my office. Governor, I'm a former CIA officer, joined right after 9/11, and served 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military. I'm actually the first CIA officer in the Senate. To me, the most important thing, again, as a Democrat from a state that Trump won, right, on the same ballot, we both won. I understand we're going to have different policy opinions. I certainly understand that the president or incoming president has the right to nominate whoever he wants. Those are not the issues for me that I'm going to spend my time on. The ones that I care about the most relate to the mission of the organization when it was founded, protecting the homeland. And I think, to me, it's one thing when there's campaign rhetoric or politicization of things. Everyone does that on both sides of the aisle in this committee and in our line of work. But when it comes to actually protecting the country, you do have to be clear and honest about facts and not conflate things. So it's just important to me that I know, particularly since you do have one of the intelligence agencies within the Department of Homeland Security, that you're going to call a spade, right? The most recent acts of domestic terrorism in New Orleans, horrible incident, in Nevada, had nothing to do with migrants, correct?
Correct.
They were homegrown American citizens. One of them was actually in a very elite military unit. I mean, it's horrible. It's one of the hardest things to catch, the sort of lone wolf, radicalized American citizen. But I want to protect ourselves. Our most recent examples of domestic terrorism were not what we've spent the majority talking about today, crime from a migrant. And I don't dispute there is crime. But I just want to know, and I want to hear from you as an intelligence officer, that you're going to speak about real threats and not blow something up, politicize something, make something more exciting, because that's maybe what the president wants to hear. But your mission to protect and defend the Constitution means calling honestly what the threats are to the country. Can you just give me a yes or no, please?
Yes, Senator, I will be as transparent and factual every day with you and the American people as possible based on the information that I have. I don't know if the investigations are closed, in New Orleans and in Nevada, but what we know so far and needs to be relayed to the American people needs to be the truth and facts.
Yeah, I'd ask that. We've talked a lot about border security. As a CIA officer, I think one of the only people on this committee who's actually worked on protecting the homeland. I'm a Middle East terrorism and militia expert by training, so I believe deeply in it. And every country of the world gets to decide who comes inside its borders. That's not a radical concept. But I think I've been open with this committee that it is also on us to fix the deeply broken legal immigration system. I'm glad to hear that you're going to carry out the laws on the immigration system. Democrats and Republicans are to blame that we haven't fixed this system. But I also believe you can't fully control the border unless you give people that we need for our companies, for our economy, a legal vetted way to come here. So do you believe in legal vetted immigration and that we need more of it in the United States?
I do believe we need to follow our legal immigration laws and that it needs to be vetted. We need more resources, I believe, in some of the elements of this to ensure.
Do you believe that our economy depends and needs some level, just like your family came from Norway and on economic, drive and wanted a better life?
Immigration's always been a part of our history and will be a part of our future. We just need to make sure that we're adhering to our nation's laws, which this body has the ability to.
I'm with you.
Continue to change and to put in place.
Again, going back to the fact that you will pledge an oath to the Constitution, not to President Trump, just like every other nominee. President Trump said in November that he is willing to use law enforcement, National Guard, or even active duty military to go after, quote, the threat from within the United States. I don't know exactly what he was talking about. But we have recent examples from your predecessors at DHS where federal law enforcement were sent into a state, in this case, Oregon, without coordination with the governor. Those federal law enforcement officers at the time were putting down threats to federal buildings, and they were legitimate threats. I don't dispute there was destruction of property going on during a bunch of protests and riots. So I don't dispute that. But they weren't wearing insignia. We talked about this. They weren't wearing any markings. So people were arrested by folks in fatigues with no names, no idea who they were, like right out of a bad Hollywood movie, okay? If the president asks you to send in federal law enforcement to a state without coordination of that governor, would you support that action?
Senator, my job, if nominated and sworn in as Secretary of Homeland Security, is to uphold the Constitution and to uphold the rules of this country. Yes, that will be the oath and the pledge that I will be making. And my goal also is to work with you to ensure that we have situations that are always appropriate, that we are well defined.
I just need to know, you're a former governor. You can imagine that if Joe Biden sent in 700 federal law enforcement under Secretary Mayorkas without coordinating with you, I think we can agree you'd be a little upset. So I just ask that you give the same respect for coordination and that we are very sensitive. People are worried about politicizing of law enforcement and the uniformed military. That's a bad thing. I hope we can agree. Lastly, I will just say, look forward to looking at the northern border, the Gordie Howe Bridge, your help staffing that. We know you aren't, right now, across many administrations, we haven't met our staffing goals at DHS, and that's a problem, so we really want to make sure that opens on time. But I also want your assurances, you received FEMA assistance from Joe Biden's administration, right? You had historic floods, you asked and requested of the administration, and you were given millions of dollars to help with that. I understand you don't like Gavin Newsom, but can you say in front of the American people that you will open the books to this committee, who does have oversight over FEMA, right? That you will open the books in a bipartisan way to ensure, whether it's North Carolina or California or anywhere in between, that the American people can know that you are not playing politics with disaster assistance?
Yes, Senator, I'll work with you and this committee to make sure I'm following the federal law and ensuring that you have information and transparency from us and from DHS and FEMA.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yield back.
Senator Langford.
Governor Noem, great to see you.
Great to see you, too.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for accepting this nod that the president has given you. For Brian, thanks Both of you, you've walked through a lot. I have had the privilege of knowing you for a very long time since we served together in the House of Representatives. So I have the benefit of knowing how your qualifications and how strong you are in all these background issues and how hard you work on these things because I've seen it firsthand. So I appreciate you stepping into this because a lot of attention across the country will be focused on this. You know that full well, and you've stepped into it. For Governor Landry, my state and many folks in my state are praying for you and for your state. You've done a great job in leadership at this moment in a very, very tough time for Louisiana. And we don't want to see acts of terrorism anywhere in our country. And it's incredibly difficult days for a governor. So thanks for your leadership on that as well. I also have to tell you, Kristi, I've whined to my wife occasionally about the temperature that's coming on Monday. I'm very excited about Trump's inaugural, but we're all going to be sitting outside in about 12 degrees. And I thought just for fun, I would check South Dakota on Monday. It's 1 for a high.
Yeah, for a high.
And so I'm going to stop whining about the temperature Monday here in Washington, D.C. on it. Look, I'm going to run through a couple of things here because I know you. Not everybody in Oklahoma knows you. The questions that I get from people, though, in Oklahoma, I want to be able to run past you because they want to be able to know the answer to these things. So I'm just going to blitz through a whole bunch of them. Will you use the legal authority that DHS already has to be able to close our border?
Yes, Senator. I will work with President Trump to ensure that we're securing our border.
Thank you. There's a lot of things that this Congress needs to do, has already been mentioned by Senator Slotkin as well, that we need to do to be able to close loopholes, to be able to give you additional authority. But there's a tremendous amount of authority currently not being used. In Oklahomans are saying, is that about to be used? And they'll be grateful to be able to hear that. No other president has ever created a phone app to be able to facilitate a faster processing of aliens in, called the CBP-1 app. It's been mentioned several times here. Will you use your authority to stop facilitating faster processing of illegal aliens into our country with the CBP-1 app?
Yes, Senator. We will eliminate the CBP-1 app, maintain some of the data that's in it that's critical to knowing who's in our country, but that app will no longer be in use.
Thank you. No other president has ever used the parole authority just in general, humanitarian parole, to facilitate faster processing of aliens into our country, which leads to the catch and release we've all heard about. So the Oklahomans that I talk to say, are we about to end the abuse of parole and end catch and release? Is that about to stop?
Senator, President Trump's been very clear that he will end catch and release.
Terrific. Folks want to know, will you use your authority with the funds that are given to you by Congress to actually build more wall rather than use the funding that's given to you, as the Biden administration did, to do environmental remediation around the border rather than actual border wall and border structure?
Yeah, Senator, President Trump has been clear that he wants to build the wall.
So do we. So will you use your authority to be able to scan more vehicles? And obviously, we've got to get you the funding to be able to do this, to be able to scan more vehicles and individuals that are carrying fentanyl into our country through our ports of entry.
Yes, Senator. We will continue to use technologies, but hopefully be able to use more with the resources that we're granted to scan those vehicles and know what's coming in and out of this country.
Last year, FEMA employees during disaster relief were instructed by one of their supervisors that if they see a Trump sign or a Trump flag flying, to skip that house, to not stop by there and tell them what their federal government can do for them. Will you allow FEMA employees or any within DHS to politicize their role and to pick and choose who gets help and who doesn't as an American?
Senator, under President Trump's administration, disaster and emergency relief will not be handed out with political bias. Every American will be responded to and treated equally.
That's what folks want to know. Will you review the Secret Service responsibilities to be able to go back through it and to say, are they focused on their primary mission, or is there something that could distract? Secret Service still chases down financial crimes. They're still chasing down child exploitation. Those are serious things for Treasury or for FBI to do. But there's a question is if that's the first priority for Secret Service.
Senator, the Secret Service is in need of dramatic reforms. They do have a protective detail element that is their priority, and also an investigation side. My understanding is that that investigation side is often used to train the protective detailed officers, but clearly they are not focusing on what their true duty is, and it needs to get back onto what they were created for, and that was the protective detail mission and emergency situations that they need to help plan and prepare for and defend.
Thank you. This committee made a request to the Secretary of Homeland Security last year, and by the way, also the head of the FBI, to be able to come before this committee and to do what every Secretary of Homeland Security has done for the last 20 years, every single year, unbroken, until last year. And then the Secretary refused to come before this committee in an open session and talk about national threats. Now, the former chairman protested strongly to the Biden administration and DHS. They weren't coming, but they still refused to be able to come. Will you come before this committee and talk about the threats openly so the American people can hear them in a public forum?
Yes, Senator. Senator Peters and I discussed this quite a bit in our meeting as well, and I have committed to come and give that briefing to this committee and to the American people. Thank you. We need that. Let me tell you another challenge we've had with Homeland Security in the past 4 years. When we ask for data and for information, we get, I'll get back to you on that. When we ask again and again and again and again, we get the same statement. I'll get back to you on that. Now, I can go down the street to the command center where they actually get the data in live and they have it up on big screens and they're tracking exactly what's happening on the southern border to the minute. But if I ask for what happened last month, they'll say, we're still gathering that data. We're not asking for anything other than what Congress is supposed to get. That's the ability to be able to see data and to have real oversight over DHS. And that has been a failure of this DHS, along with multiple other issues on that. When we request the data for basic things like how many special interest aliens were allowed across the border, if it was last year, we had to find out on our own. It was 70,000 people that were targeted by this administration as a potential national security risk that were not just found at the border, that were released when they were found at the border. 70,000 people just from last year in the country right now that this administration declared at the border, they're a potential national security risk. Now, I know you're not going to do that, but when we ask for the data and for the information, when we say, how's the National Vetting Center working? Do you have the connection between it to be able to screen individuals there? We're just doing our oversight responsibility. You've served in Congress before and did a great job on that and did oversight. We want to still be able to do the same thing. Will you provide data to this committee so that we can cooperate with you to help? Senator, I will follow the law and be transparent with you and allow you to do the due diligence towards oversight that you are tasked with. I have absolutely no doubt about that, Governor. I have absolutely no doubt. Looking forward to you serving in that role. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, Governor Noem. You are almost done.
Okay.
We've been through a lot of questions. I think you've handled the questions very well. And there's going to be, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and I think the ranking member has a few, and I think we'll be done very shortly. I think a lot of Americans, including some conservatives, misunderstand the First Amendment. They think the First Amendment says that Facebook has to publish my opinion, or the Wall Street Journal has to publish my opinion, or we need to force them to be fair. That's not what the First Amendment's about at all. The First Amendment really doesn't apply to telling private companies what we can or cannot say. YouTube censored me, and I despise their policy. They actually took down speeches I made on the floor. But really, I don't have a legal recourse other than I can complain about YouTube being unfair and not hosting, both sides of an issue. However, with the government, though, there is a rule. The First Amendment specifically says Congress shall pass no law banning or abridging speech. And this is what really got us worried about, what not only the FBI was doing, but the Department of Homeland Security, actually meeting with these companies on a weekly basis. And imagine the chilling effect of this. Imagine that there are cameras here, that they're going to end their filming of this interview and then decide, well, what she said or what he said really was misinformation and we should edit that out. Can you imagine? It's just hard for me to imagine that the media has not, which once defended the First Amendment, hasn't been in more of an uproar over the government meeting with the media to decide things. Some of this we didn't know, and then Elon Musk bought Twitter. People asked him, they said, well, you paid $44 billion for Twitter. Isn't that too much? And he said, I paid $44 billion to defend free speech. And it's been an amazing service, not only to open up the forum to more viewpoints, but to point out what the government was doing. In this last week, we heard from Mark Zuckerberg, who said that the pushiness, the coerciveness of government meeting with them was unprecedented, and that they pushed back. But he also said worse than them just sort of telling him he should restrict speech, they also threatened him. They threatened to come after him through antitrust law. They threatened to remove parts of, Section 230 of the liability protection. Just to imagine this bully nature of government. And I know you're opposed to that, but if you're confirmed and you're in a position of saying, we're just no longer sending people to meet with media, and the way I describe it is to talk about constitutionally protected speech, because some will say, oh, well, what about, pornography, or what about child trafficking? Those are illegal. Those are not constitutionally protected speech. You have every ability to meet with that. But for constitutionally protected speech, will you tell us in America that you will no longer be sending government agents to meet with the media?
Yes, Senator, I'll work with you to ensure that civil rights and liberties are protected and that we are not in the misinformation and disinformation space like the current DHS is.
The only other thing I would ask on this basis is we will send requests. We sent requests previously, sometimes and often bipartisan requests for information. The Twitter files, Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss did a great job of showing what was happening in Twitter and how they were cooperating with government. I think the other investigation that needs to occur is who were the people in government they were talking to? Do they still work at DHS? And can we make sure that they're not in a position of authority? And this is not something I'm going to tell you to do. It's just a request that you have your own investigation, that you have people who work for DHS to say, we are going to look for people who are bringing their political bias to work and trying to influence speech and restrict speech based on their bias, and help us in rooting that out and making sure that these people never again have that responsibility. Because I think that I don't think there's ever been anything like this as far as the restriction of speech. And I think the election is largely going to stop and tilt things the other way. But will you help us by looking internally for those who are trying to restrict speech?
Senator, I look forward to working with you on that mission.
I don't have any other questions now, but I think Senator Peters and Senator Blumenthal, and we'll see how it goes. We're going to start with Senator Peters with one more 5-minute round.
Yeah, I'll be fairly brief. We've had opportunity to talk at length about many issues, and again, I appreciate that, Governor. I just want to stress going forward, and we've heard a lot of comments here. I think there's been a fair amount of political theater, not as much as I know exists in other committees, and I've always strived, and I know Ranking Member, or now Chairman Paul, share the notion that we want to be a fact-based committee and try to find tangible solutions to the tough problems that we face, and data is important. We've heard a lot of numbers being thrown around here, and I don't have time to go through and challenge those numbers. Some of them we don't even know where they came from. I don't think that's helpful to the very important mission, if confirmed, that you're going to be dealing with. So I hope in the future that we're actually dealing with facts. You've mentioned many times that you do want to deal with facts and real data. And again, we heard a lot here that's not real data, and we should not operate that way. And if confirmed, when we move forward, I'm going to look forward to working with you based on the facts and understand where the real threats are, how we need to appropriate resources to make sure we're meeting those threats. And let's take this hyper-partisanship out of such an important issue of Homeland Security. We have way too much partisanship in this country, and it's resulted in a polarization of people here. We've got to come together as this country. We've got to lock arms and understand that we're all proud Americans. We all want to do what's best for the American people and solve the issues that are before us. So in that spirit, and certainly you've communicated that spirit to me, but in that spirit, I hope, if confirmed, that is exactly what you will be bringing to this office. And let's move away from this toxic political environment that we have in the country and celebrate what's great about our country and the spirit of bringing the American people together. So I have one question before we turn it over to other members. As a member of this committee, as well as the Armed Services Committee, I've focused a great deal on the safe integration of drones in our airspace while addressing the growing threats that drones possess. We certainly see what drones are doing in changing the face of warfare, whether it's in Ukraine and other battlefields around the world. We are very concerned about the weaponization of those drones and what it could mean to the security here in the United States. I've proposed comprehensive legislation to extend authorities beyond just the FBI and DOJ and Homeland Security to local law enforcement. You mentioned in your comments about security for the Super Bowl, which is incredibly important. But we have to remember that that threat exists for all games. In fact, one of the biggest supporters of my legislation is the NFL. In fact, we just had a recent playoff game that was delayed because of drones that flew into that playoff game. We are very concerned that you could have a drone with a grenade or an explosive device, which would be absolutely catastrophic. It's absolutely essential that we address this threat. What we're seeing around the world and what we're seeing in daily activities should be a concern. I think this is just a matter of time. It's not if, it's when. And we need to be on the front end of that. And with that in mind, I want to remind folks that Congress just recently extended critical counter-UAS authority, counter-drone authority, only for a short-time basis for the 12th time. We only do these little tiny short-term extensions, and we aren't dealing with the problem comprehensively as we should. And those are going to expire on March 14th, a very short time from now. And so my question for you, Governor, is if confirmed as DH Secretary, will you commit to working with me and my colleagues to pass durable, long-term authorities that will protect this country from what is a real threat and it's just a matter of time? And I don't want to have a horrible incident occur and people wonder why we didn't take action beforehand. So please address that.
Senator, I look forward to working with you in this committee to address the threats we may face and the usage of drones in this country in relation to our national security interests and our homeland security interests. So thank you for bringing up the conversation today, because it is one of the areas within DHS that we have a responsibility to address in cooperation with Congress.
And my first comments on bringing people together. Please comment on that.
Oh, well, thank you,
I didn't
sir.
ask that question,
yes,
but
no.
it's in my 24 seconds left.
I'm looking forward to working with everyone, Republicans and Democrats, and everyone else in between that in this country that is focused on keeping America safe and secure for our future. I would just point, Senator, to my background and my history. When I came to Congress, I worked with Republicans and Democrats on both sides of the aisle on many pieces of legislation and was very happy to do so and focus on priorities on where we could agreement, knowing we may disagree on some issues, but there was areas where we could keep the federal government accountable and do due diligence by the people that pay their taxes and get up and go to work every single day. As governor as well, I was governor for every single person in the state of South Dakota, and they were my #1 priority, and everyone knew there that it didn't matter if you were Republican or Democrat, that my focus was on them and keeping our state thriving and free. So I look forward to continuing the work that I always have to be coming up with solutions and in a bipartisan manner. And hopefully my visits to your office and conversations reflected that and my intention on how I would conduct the role as the Department of Homeland Security Secretary.
Got a brief follow-up to that.
Sure.
So it's data
Yes.
and facts that we can all agree on that drive our policy and not political theater. Would you agree?
Well, certainly, sir, we need to be addressing facts and information rather than political theater. We also need to speak truth to facts. So I think it's important that we're willing to confront our challenges head on and have those conversations. And you'll see me back at your office door very soon to continue our work together.
Very good. Thank you.
And I want to second basically what Senator Peters has said. Like on records requests, I've told him, and I plan on it, it's going to be administration of my party. But if he wants records and they're legitimate records, we're going to sign requests together, and we'd like to get the records. It also helps, though, and I think Senator Langford mentioned this, is you ask a question, not you, but to the administration or any administration, they're like, oh, yeah, we'll get back to you on it. Many times I've even asked in advance, and I would suggest that we ask in advance together. We ask in advance. If you're coming in a month, we say we want this data, be prepared to talk about it. And if you are, you'll have many more friends on both sides because what usually happens, and that's why I don't like springing the question. If it's a technical question that needs data, we're going to tell you in advance, at least I will, and we want you to come prepared with that. And that goes a long way because really what happens is we get stiff-armed. They say, we'll get back to you. And then we have no way to force you really, other than we could cut the money off, and nobody ever does that. But you'll have 200,000 people working for you. By goodness, send your experts out, scour the records. And it is true. I mean, facts are difficult, and sometimes there's different spins on the same set of facts. But I think that will help. On the drones, I think we need more facts, so I'm more than willing to work with the ranking member on doing something on drones, but I don't want every sheriff out there shooting up in the sky at stuff. We got to figure out, we got to get the truth about, do we really have drones everywhere flying all the time? How many of them are planes? How many of them are drones? And let's go through this, and then let's figure out. And then let's talk about how we bring drones down. If we interrupt and collect a lot of cellular signal through that, are we doing it with a warrant? What are we going to do with all the Americans' data that we've collected to take down drones? If we have to take a whole cell tower's worth of data, there's a lot of innocent people's data is going to be collected in that. Is that being gotten rid of? So I think there are ways we can get to the right place. Everybody, obviously, nobody wants drones coming down. The only other thing that I'd add on drones before I turn it over to Senator Langford is, look, I'm all for the NFL being protected, the Super Bowl being protected. They need to pay. They are a very rich organization. They want drones flying over in New Orleans. I'm all for it. The NFL ought to pay the government if the government's doing it, or we ought to have private contractors doing it, but they shouldn't just get it for free. Senator Langford.
Thank you. Thanks again. As Senator Paul will remember on this, there used to be a public-facing website that all Americans could actually get the data, what's happening on the border, what's actually moving, and then when the numbers got bad, that seemed to disappear. And then we couldn't even get the data anymore. So I look forward to actually finding ways to be able to have everybody has the ability to be able to see some of this data as well on it. There's a reason that the DHS secretary is the very first week of nominations. This is a really important role, and it is a nonpartisan role. It is a national security role, and we're grateful that you stepped into this, but it is important that we actually get you on the task to be able to make sure that's out there. You mentioned earlier in your testimony that we do have a morale problem at DHS right now. And I think a lot of that is because people that signed up to be federal law enforcement to be able to protect the United States of America have felt like they've been sidelined and they've not been able to do their job that they really signed up for. And what I'm hearing from you is you're going to allow them to do their job again. What has been historically true for a long time, that federal law enforcement is there to actually help protect the country and the citizens in those communities, that you're going to allow them to do that, and that's helpful. So I have two quick things that I want to be able to mention on this. One is right now, just in the structure of this, and we can talk about this at a different time, but CBP facilities that are along the border are really run by a different entity called GSA. And they're not allowed to be able to do updates on their facilities or to design their facilities. Somebody who lives 3,000 miles away and who doesn't actually do Border Patrol work, they actually design and oversee their facilities. That's a problem that we've got to be able to fix. So we've worked to be able to give more flexibility to